So the translocation is nothing but the bulk movement of substances through the vascular tissues is called the translocation. And the xylem, the xylem is associated with the translocation of water, the mineral salts, the organic nitrogen, hormones, etc. From the root to the aerial parts of the plant. And whereas the phloem is associated with the translocation of organic and inorganic salts from the leaves to the parts of the plant. And we have also seen in the last class how do plants absorb water. So in the plants absorb water in two pathways. We have seen it in the last class. The one is the apoplast, the pathway, and the second one is the symplast pathway. So this is the diagram, and we have seen it in the last class, right? So the apoplast, there's a movement through intercellular spaces and walls of the cells, and the symplast, there is a movement of water through the plasmodesmata. And I will show you the video, how the water is transported. There is absorption of water from the soil to the xylem. So the plant and has a number of the roots and the root heads. From the root heads, the water is absorbed and enters into the epidermis, and then the cortex, then the endodermis and the phylum. So these are the two pathways. The one is the apoplast and the other one is the symplast. So this is the symplast. The molecules are moving through the plasmodesmata. This is the second one. There's a movement of water through the intercellular spaces, through the walls. And finally, the water enters into the xylem. You can clearly see the video, how the water is absorbed. So the question of water, I will show you again. Just look at the video. From the root heads, water is absorbed. So the absorbed water is moved in two pathways. The first pathway, that is through the cytoplasmic strands, through the plasmodesmata. You can see the gaps between the cells. Yes. The other pathway, that is the symplast. So through the intercellular spaces, that means between the walls. So this is how finally the water enters into the xylem. So in today's class, so we will be seeing how the water is transported upwards. There's a water movement up a plant. That is the ascent of sap, the movement, upward movement of water. So we learned about how plants absorb water from the soil. Now we will try to understand how the water is transported to various parts of the plant. So here, the ascent of sap. Today's lecture is about the ascent of sap. So the ascent of sap, it is there are various factors which are responsible for the movement of water upwards. The ascent of sap means there is a movement of water upwards, the upward movement of water. So the upward movement of water is done by the different factors. So one is the the root pressure, and one is the transpiration pull. First one is the root and the second one is the transpiration pull. So I request all of you to watch carefully, listen carefully, and these are two very important concepts to understand the transportation of water. So the name, the ascent of sap, ascent means the increasing. So moving up. So the means the water is moving up, but in the against the gravity. So as we said, as the water is already reached the xylem vessels, okay, xylem, let us see how the water is moved up. So that is the ascent of sap, the movement of water upwards, upward movement of water from root to the topmost leaves of a plant. So as we said, there are various factors which are responsible for this movement of water upwards. The first one, as we said, root pressure. So what is root pressure? How the root pressure is created, and how the root pressure helps for the movement of water. Okay. So we need to understand that the root pressure and how much of water can be transported upwards with this pressure. In absorption of water, we saw that the water is absorbed through root hair, then the reaches to the cortex, endodermis, finally the xylem. Xylem, right? So when there is a continuous inward movement of water through the root hairs into the xylem, so there is absorption of water by the root hairs and finally reaches the xylem. And the second one, there is a process called the transpiration, which is there is a loss of water in the form of water vapors through stomata. So there are two things happening in the plant. One is there is a continuous absorption of water, there is an inward movement of water into the xylem. And second one, there is a water is lost, there is a transpiration. But how this root pressure is created? How the root pressure is created? Let us see how the root pressure is created. So when the water is moving continuously, absorption, but there is no transpiration due to the closure of stomata, what happens? So there is accumulation of water in the xylem. There is a accumulation of water in the xylem. Because of this continuous absorption of water, there is no transpiration takes place that generates a pressure in the xylem vessels of the xylem, which is called the root pressure. So the root pressure, the pressure which causes the water to rise up in xylem. So what are the conditions for the root pressure? How the root pressure is created? Because where there is a hello. Sir, you sir disturb చేశారు
సార్ వీడియో ఏం కనబడట్లేదు సార్ మీది
వీడియో రావట్లేదా
వీడియో ఏం కనిపించడం లేదు
అప్పుడే వస్తుందా సార్
సార్ ఏం కనబడట్లేదు మీ వాయిస్ మాత్రం వినిపిస్తుంది
సార్ ఇప్పుడు సార్
ఇంకా లేదు సార్ కనబడట్లేదు
సార్ ఇప్పుడు సార్
ఇప్పుడు కనిపిస్తుంది స్క్రీన్
కనబడుతుందా ఫస్ట్ లో వచ్చిందా సార్
కనిపిస్తుంది సార్
సార్ ఫస్ట్ లో వచ్చిందా వీడియో
ఏం రాదు ఇప్పుడు లేక ప్యాటర్న్ మీ సెల్ విద్యావాహిని కనిపిస్తుంది
అది అది ఇప్పుడు ఇంతకుముందు వచ్చిందా సార్? ఇంతకుముందు ఏమైనా స్క్రీన్లో డిస్ప్లే అయిందా? ఇదంతా డిస్ప్లే అయిందా?
ఓపెన్ అయింది సార్. ఇంతకుముందు వచ్చింది.
ఇంతకుముందు వచ్చింది. ఆ మూమెంట్
వస్తుంది సార్.
వచ్చిందా సార్? అబ్జార్ప్షన్ ఆఫ్ వాటర్ వచ్చిందా? సార్ ఈ వీడియో వచ్చిందా?
ఓపెన్ అయింది సార్. ఇంక వీడియో రాలేదు. ఓపెన్ అయ్యే వాటర్ మూమెంట్ ఇన్ ప్లాంట్స్ సార్.
ఓకే ఓకే. సో వీడియో చూపిస్తాను మళ్ళీ. ఓకే.
ఓకే.
This is how the water is absorbed by the root heads. The absorption of water through the two pathways, that is the apoplast and the symplast. You can see in the video, there is the first. So this is one path. They travel in the cytoplasm between the cell. There is a through plasmodesmata. There is another pathway. There is a symplast through the intercellular spaces between walls. So this is how the water reaches the xylem through these two pathways, apoplast and the symplast. The water reaches the xylem. So we are talking about the root pressure. సార్ ఇప్పుడు కనబడుతుందా సార్? ఇప్పుడు ప్రొసెసర్ స్క్రీన్ కనబడుతుందా?
కనిపిస్తుంది.
ఓకే. సో scent of sap, that is the upward movement of water. The upward movement of water is done by the different factors. The one is the root pressure, and the second one is the transpiration pull. So in root pressure, the root pressure is created. Okay, we have seen it. So the first one, when there is a continuous movement of water or the continuous movement of water into the xylem, the inward movement of water, and when there is a transpiration takes place and there is a loss of water in the water vapors through stomata. So the two things are happening. One is the absorption of water and second one is the transpiration. But how this root pressure is created? So when the water is continuously moved into the xylem, when there is no transpiration, when there is no loss of water, so what happens? The water is accumulated in the xylem. So this accumulated water that creates a pressure, it is called the root pressure. So what are the conditions for the root pressure? So root pressure, for the creation of the root pressure, because of this continuous movement of water into the xylem, and when there is no transpiration, the water is accumulated, that generates a pressure called the root pressure. So this pressure is responsible for the movement of water only at few centimeters, like in herbaceous plants. So this root pressure is enough to pump or push the water for the few centimeters. But in trees, this root pressure is not enough to pump the water upwards. But this is helpful in herbaceous plants. We can experiment showing the root pressure. Select the well-watered plant, cut the plant at few centimeters above the soil, and fix the glass tube into it. And you can see the mercury levels. There's the initial level of the mercury. So because of the root pressure, the water starts moving upwards in the glass tube, and finally there's a rise in the level of mercury. So because of, you can see there's a rise in the level of mercury. This rise in the level of mercury occurred due to the hello. Hello.
సార్
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 సార్ చెప్పండి.
అది మీరే చెప్తున్నారు హలో హలో అంటున్నారు.
సార్
ఇది కరెక్ట్ పడుతుంది వంగాల మేడం. అదే నేను చెప్పేది.
హలో
సార్.
సార్ వినబడుతుందా ఇప్పుడు?
సార్.
ఓకే. So the root pressure to summer. So the root pressure, there is a pressure which causes the water to rise up in xylem. This is one of the factor, and the main conditions. So వినబడుతుందా?
సార్ సార్ కనబడట్లేదు. హలో,
వీడియో కనబడలేదా?
వీడియో కనబడట్లేదు సార్.
స్క్రీనా?
రాలే. ఇప్పుడు వచ్చింది సార్.
Okay. And then and let's see the one more situation related to this topic, that is the guttation. The guttation, that is the loss of water in the form of liquid through the specialized structures called the hydrothodes. So the hydrothodes, these are the openings present at the leaf margins. So there is a loss of water in the form of liquid through these openings, which is called the guttation. So you can see the margins of the leaf has the hydrothodes. The guttation takes place in winter and early mornings. The entire night, as the water is absorbed and the water is available, and it creates the root pressure. As the transpiration is low or doesn't take place, because of the closure of the stomata, the excess water moves out by these openings, and the process is called the guttation. So you can see the water droplets like this. So this water droplets happens because it forms because of guttation. Okay, so the root pressure, and second one, this is the guttation. And the conditions for guttation, the absorption of water is high, there is availability of water is high, and there is a loss of water, the transpiration is zero, so the excess water is moves out through the margins as water droplets. So the process is called guttation. Okay, then the pressure that is enough for the herbaceous plants to push the water up, but in case of large trees like sequoia, it is not enough. So for this, we need the very important force, transpiration pull. After the transpiration root pressure, the next important force which is responsible for the ascent of sap is transpiration. So from the absorption of water to the roots, and finally it reaches the leaves. How the movement of water takes place from the roots to the leaves, that can be explained by the transpiration pull. The transpiration pull is the most important force with which the water is going up, and this is more than enough to pump or pull this water up for the topmost level of the leaf, even in the tallest plants. The transpiration pull, it works on certain principles. So before going to the principles, the transpiration pull is also called the cohesion tension theory, and is proposed by the Dixon and Jolly. Transpiration pull, it is also called cohesion tension theory, proposed by Dixon and Jolly. So what is a transpiration? The transpiration is nothing but there is a loss of water in the form of water vapors through the stomata. So we know the structure of stomata. So the stomata, these are the tiny pore-like structures present in the lower epidermis of the leaf. So these stomata, they have the two guard cells, whereas they are bean shaped in dicots, double shaped in monocots, and have the stomatal opening, and they are surrounded by the subsidiary cells. So here, whatever the water is present in the xylem, okay, whatever the water is present in the xylem, only the less than 1% of water is useful for the plant growth and the photosynthesis. Less than 1% of water is used by these two, used by the plant plant activities. There is a photosynthesis and the plant growth. The most of the water is lost as water vapors by transpiration, right? So we have seen there is a loss of water in two processes. One is the transpiration and the other one is the guttation. So what is the difference between transpiration and the guttation? So the transpiration, you can see the differences here in the table. So the transpiration that takes place through the cuticle, end cells and the stomata, whereas the guttation that takes place through the hydrothodes. It is usually occur in the day, it is usually occur in the night. Water lost in the form of water vapors, water lost in the form of droplets. Then in transpiration, the water lost is pure, whereas in guttation, the droplet contains organic and inorganic solvents. In transpiration, it gives the cooling effect. It does not give a cooling effect. Okay, so these are the few differences between the transpiration and the guttation. So in both the cases, there is a loss of water, but in transpiration, the loss of water in the form of water vapors, whereas in guttation, the loss of water in the form of water droplets. Okay, so the transpiration, normally you can say the transpiration takes place through the stomata, whereas the transpiration, guttation takes place through the hydrothodes. Then try to know what is the transpiration and the evaporation. The difference between the transpiration and evaporation. The transpiration is a physical process, whereas the evaporation is the transpiration is a physiological process, whereas the evaporation is a physical process. In transpiration, it is a loss of water from the surface of the cells, whereas the evaporation, it is a loss of water from the free surface of the water. it is the regulated process, and the evaporation non-regulated process. There the guard cells are involved. There is no guard cells. It is comparatively slow. It is faster. Okay, so it's influenced by the anatomy of plants. There is no such influences. So there is a difference between the transpiration and the evaporation. So how now the transpiration pull. Now go to the transpiration pull. Here, what are the forces which are involved in transpiration pull? So one is the cohesive force. That means the attraction between the similar and identical particles. Here we are talking about the movement of water. The similar particles are nothing but the water molecules. That means the attraction between the mutual attraction between the water molecules. There is the one force. There is the cohesion. Then the attraction is the another one, that is the attraction between different types of particles. Here the different types of particles means the between the water molecules and the xylem vessels, that is the lignin. So there is a mutual attraction between the different particles, that is between the water molecules and the lignin. So these two forces, the cohesive force and the attractive force, when you see the water column, because of the adhesion force between the water and the lignin, one water molecule is attracted towards the lignin. Now another water molecule is pulled by the water molecule because of this cohesive force. So because of the cohesive force and the adhesive force, these two forces helps in maintaining the continuous water column in the xylem vessels. These two forces which help in the continuous movement of water. And the other force which is helpful, that is the capillary force. So because of the diameter of the capillary, the xylem, because of the narrow tubes, the thin tubes, which also helps in the movement of water upwards. So here, the cohesive force, there's a mutual attraction between the water molecules. Adhesive force, there's a mutual attraction between the water molecules and the xylem vessels, there's the lignin. And the capillary force, because of the narrow tubes and the thin tubes, these three, the forces, the movement of water upwards. Then how this water, the pool is created, the transpiration pool is created. Now here the concentration of water vapor in the atmosphere is lower than that of intercellular spaces of the leaf. You can see in the diagram, the concentration of water vapor in the atmosphere is lower than that of intercellular spaces. It means in atmosphere there is no water vapor, but in the leaf there is a high water vapors. Due to this difference, the water vapors diffuses from the cellular spaces to the atmosphere. So లోపల నుండి వాటర్ వేపర్స్ అనేవి బయటకు వచ్చేస్తాయి. సో లోపల నుండి వాటర్ వేపర్స్ అనేవి బయటకు వచ్చేస్తాయి. So in this process there is a loss of water in the form of water vapors, known as the transpiration. However, in the leaf blade, the water moves from mesophyll to the intercellular spaces as the water is continuously diffuses, the water vapors continuously diffuses out through the stomata. So as the water vapors moves out of the stomata, then the water is slowly moves from the mesophyll cells to the intercellular spaces. So this continuous loss of water that creates a suction or pull, it is called the transpiration pull. So this suction that creates upward movement of water, And the other thing that also helps in the suction and the pulling of water upwards, that is the root pressure, which also helps in movement of water upwards up to a certain height. Whereas the capillary force, it also helps in the movement of water up to the certain height, and cohesive and adhesive forces of water. So because of the loss of water through transpiration results in the formation of pool. The pool is created by the transpiration, so it is called the transpiration pool. This transpiration pool is strong enough to take water column to the topmost level of the leaf in tallest plants. So you can see the video, the ascent of sap, the ascent of sap takes place without upward movement of water. So the plants absorb water through the soil. Then the water needs to transport it from the soil, from the roots to other parts of the plant. So the upward movement of water, which is called ascent of sap. The sap, whatever scent contains, it contains dissolved organic salts. The scientists have proposed various theories to explain the mechanism of ascent of sap. The one is, as we have discussed, that is the root pressure theory. So the water which pushed up for the few centimeters, and this root pressure is enough for herbaceous plants, but it is not enough for tall trees. For this, the most accepted theory that explains ascent of sap in all types of plants is transpiration pool. This transpiration pool theory is also called cohesion tension theory, explained by the Dixon and Jolly. So here is transpiration, how the transpiration takes place. So the intercellular spaces and the cells, the mesophyll cells. Then here, because the difference of water vapors, the transpiration takes place, means that is a loss of water. Along with water, minerals are also transported. The main process, there is a transpiration pool, how that is take place, you can see in the video. Because of the lower concentration of water vapors in the atmosphere, and whereas there is a high concentration in the water vapors in the leaf, because of this difference, through the stomata, the water vapor diffuses out through the stomata. So there is a loss of water through the stomata, which is called transpiration. So because of the continuous loss of water, which creates a pool, which is called the transpiration pool. So here there is a loss of water molecules, you can see to the stomata. So because of the continuous loss of water vapors, it creates a pool, that creates a pool which is called the transpiration pool. So you can see the water molecules are moving up. So these are the xylem vessels. Here the water column, these are cohesive and the adhesive forces which maintains the continuity of water movement. There is a cohesion, that is the attraction between the water molecules, and then the adhesive force, that is the attraction between the water molecules to the vessels. So these two forces which helps in maintaining the continuous water column in xylem vessels. So even in the capillary force, that also helpful. So here from the root heights, the root pressure is helpful, and then the capillary force, and then the cohesive and the adhesive forces, which helps in the continuous movement of water upwards. So here how the water is transported from the root height to the top of the leaves. So it can be explained by these two processes. One is the root pressure theory. The second one is the transpiration pull theory. Then here, what are the merits and the demerits of transpiration pull theory? The transpiration pull theory of ascent of sap has several merits and the demerits. The importance of the few merits are: the ascent of sap is directly proportional to the rate of transpiration. The transpiration pull created due to the transpiration pushes water column in the xylem vessels from root to the leaves. The strong cohesive force and the adhesive force are sufficient to prevent the rupture of water column in the xylem. The osmotic potential of mucosal cells has been recorded about 20 bars, which is quite sufficient for ascent of sap. It is purely a physical process, does not require metabolic energy. If it requires, it is negligible. The movement of water under tension is rapid. It can be shown by the stem of a wilted plant under water. The different workings of xylem vessels help to withstand the pulling force of water from above. So what are the demerits of this transpiration pull theory? That is, the main objection against this theory is the presence of air bubbles in the xylem vessels, which will break the continuity of water. So the main criticism brought against this theory is the presence of air bubbles in the xylem vessels. So bending of stems by strong wind causes stretching the columns of water and causing them to cavitate. It may discontinue the water column in xylem vessels. These are the demerits and the merits of transpiration pull theory. So the transpiration pull theory is very important for 4 marks in IPE. So try to understand. See the video. Water is absorbed by the plant by root hairs, and it is transported by the root pressure. The root pressure it is enough for the herbaceous plants, but for tall trees it is not enough to pull or push the water upwards. The scientists many scientists they tried to explain the ascent of sap. The one is the root pressure theory. Because of the continuous movement of water, and when there is no transpiration, the water is accumulated in the xylem. Because of this accumulation of xylem, that creates a pressure which is called the root pressure. And then the most accepted theory that explains the scent of sap in the types of plants, in all types of plants, that is the transpiration pull theory. So you can see that how the transpiration takes place and the transpiration pull takes place. Because of the concentration of water vapors, the atmosphere is lower than the interstellar spaces of the leaf. That means in atmosphere there is low water vapor. In leaves there is high water vapors. So because of this difference, the water vapors moves out from the interstellar spaces to the atmosphere through the stomata. So because of this continuous movement of water vapors, there is a loss of water through this stomata, which creates a pull called the transpiration pull. So the transpiration pull that helps in pulling of water upwards. So the cohesion, there is an attraction between the water molecules. This is one force. And the second one is adhesive force, that is between the attraction between the water molecules and the xylem walls. There is a lignin. Even because of capillary force, because of having the narrow tubes, which also helps in the movement of water upwards. Okay. So that's all the today's class. So stay home and stay safe. Thank you. Hello.